when we were outside the doctor's office in the car, I just decided to myself that no, I'm not going in. I'm not going to have this conversation. I just, whatever I need to do, I'll do it in my own brain space.
Welcome to ADHDerp with Stephen and Harv. ADHDerp, where whimsy meets focus with Stephen and Harv. Join us on a journey through the quirks and curiosities of ADHD as we navigate the delightful chaos of our minds and explore the magic with the neurodiverse world. Strap in for laughs, insights, and a sprinkle of randomness as we embrace the unique adventures that come with ADHD.
Episode 2, Harv's Diagnosis Journey.
So, episode 2, here we are.
Episode 2, here we are. How did we get here?
Who fucking knows?
How's your week been?
Oh, Jesus, that's a great question. I don't even know what day it is.
No.
My week. Fucking hell. You see, this is the kind of stuff I need preparation for.
Yeah.
I fucking hate questions like that. It's like, what did you do? You know, when you're going into the office after the weekend, it's like, did you get up at the weekend?
Instantly blank.
I've no idea.
Yeah.
I literally can't even remember my own name right now.
I get that with like interview questions and stuff like that. You can do prep for hours and days, and then when you go into the actual interview and they ask you the question, that you literally just rehearsed blank and you just wing it and hope for the best.
It's nuts. Like, obviously coming from the situation that I'm in, going into interviews and stuff, it's like the whole idea of interviews is just so skewed against people like us. You know, it's just complete rote memory, you know, for specific things like that, especially in tech, you know, where you're being asked, as I was in a recent one, what's the code for this? You know, how would I do this on the Linux command line? Or what's the SQL command to pull this stuff in? Like, nobody needs to know that off the top of their head.
You're, like, anyone who's actually using this stuff on a day-to-day basis doesn't fucking have an encyclopedic knowledge of that in their brain. They open a Google tab and search it.
That's another rant. I wrote a whole LinkedIn post about this situation, which maybe I'll get into it at another stage when I'm not so bitter still about it. I'm not super bitter anymore, but I was very, very bitter at it. About it at the start. And just for a bit of context, this was a role I applied for 4 months ago. Didn't hear anything for 2 months. Then was asked in for an interview. Interview went unbelievably well. Probably one of the best interviews I've ever had. Got called back for a second interview. That went just as well, if not better. And at this stage, I decided in my head that I was never going to do a task. You know, if they asked me to do a task, I wasn't going to do it. But because the conversation had gone so well and I was actually really intrigued by the role, I said, oh, okay, right, I'll go ahead if they ask me to do it. So they did ask me to do it. Spent a week or whatever it was, few days doing the task, going through the data and putting together a presentation. And then went in to kind of conduct the presentation. I expected it to be like an interview, but it was literally just, I went into the room with like 3 other people, did the presentation, asked if they had questions, and that was it. And that went unbelievable. Like, literally got so much great feedback. The recruiter said, the hiring manager said the presentation was exceptional. And then I got a call from the recruiter saying, we want you to come in to have an informal meet and greet with the COO. I was like, wow, okay, perfect.
At that
pretty
point,
much in the bag.
Yeah.
Yeah, which I did anyway, kind of along the process because it was going so well. And yeah, so I went in for the meeting with the COO, meet and greet, informal. Was waiting around for about 15 minutes after the time it was scheduled for. And turned out he and his underling head of department show up with my CV in hand, completely like marked, you know, notes, and brought into a room and essentially interrogated, you know, the most difficult,
Fuck's sake,
like really specific technical questions, which I could have prepared for if I knew it was going to be a technical interview. But because it was supposed to be an informal meet and greet conversation, sit down, have a chat, have a coffee, see if we match up in terms of personalities or whatever, I was completely taken aback and just like my mind went haywire. couldn't.
Yeah.
Now, I still did quite a good job at the interview, you know, but when it came to the technical specifics, which, you know, I'm able to do, I've done for the last 10, 12 years in my career.
Yeah.
I've come from what was once a Fortune 500 company, you know, for the last 7 years. It just blew my mind. And then when I got the phone call from the recruiter, you know, with the bad news, the reason was because I wasn't technical enough, which is just insane.
Yeah. Like, you have to wonder who, like, if there is fault to assign there, who's at fault? Like, if you had have known what that meeting was going to be, you could have put the preparation in, you could have prepared yourself in a technical front. If the recruiter had have known your own personal condition, your, like, that being thrown into a random situation,
Yeah.
where you're going to have questions thrown at you in such a, like, a quick fire kind of way, and you're going to just be expected to perform, that if the recruiter had have known that is not the correct situation to test you, that would that could have made a big difference there. And it's kind of part why the, like, going down the road and seeking a diagnosis is so important for people like us, because if you don't know how to tackle these subjects, you could end up in situations like that you found yourself in, and have probably found yourself in situations like that before, where you're not equipped to answer it. You're perfectly able to answer those questions. You're perfectly able to perform the role, and you could probably, like, exceed within that role. But because of a miscommunication, probably from the recruiter or from the hiring manager, it led to sorry, please fuck off.
Yeah.
And that's not really fair. So,
And realistically, like, it might sound cocky or whatever, but, like, it really was their loss, because the value that I would have brought to that team, and not just the team, but the whole business, would have been, like, immense.
Yeah.
With the unique experience that I have. So yeah, it's just, and like you mentioned how important it is to seek the diagnosis, but not only seeking the diagnosis, because that's great from our perspective as the diagnosed, you know, but it really needs to be a more open conversation. And that's what we're trying to do, you know, with this podcast and with the conversations that we're having, to make it more acceptable to have these open conversations. And if it does become more kind of widespread and acknowledged that not everybody, you know, can do an interview the same as some people, you know, specific tests or specific ways of doing things don't really work for everybody.
Yeah.
And that if we can kind of push that idea and that conceptualization out to the wider community, you know, maybe recruitment practices change, and maybe things become easier for people.
If us doing this affects even one person, if one person in an interview or one hiring manager performing an interview changes the way they think, and it affects an outcome in a more positive way, that's immense. That's impacting someone's life there. And that's, like, if we do that once, we've done what we've set out to do, I think. But yeah, let's talk about the diagnosis process, because I think that was key here, because you were able to arm yourself after the disappointment, because you're aware of the feelings that could come up, the, like, potential rejection, which is something we'll talk about at a later stage, how the potential rejection could make you feel. So let's talk about your experience. You were diagnosed with ADHD in 2022, if I remember right. It's
dates, hey. It was 2022, so I think it was November 2022 when I eventually got around to it. But it kind of, the idea of diagnosis or assessment had been kind of brewing for a while. I had a few friends who, you know, had discussed what their life was like with ADHD. You know, the specific challenges they come up with, how it affects them, and, you know, all these kind of things. And when you're having these conversations with people, there's always some, you know, you can always find some common ground with anybody's afflictions or anybody's life or situation. But But in this particular case, it was so resonant with me. You know, I could feel she was talking about my life and how I'd grown up, that it really lit a spark, and it was like, maybe I should think about this. That's what I was saying in my own mind.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, to the outer world, or to the people I was talking to, I was saying, I have this. This is me, you know? But in the back of my mind, it's like, I have this. This is me. But, like, I really need to, like, do something about it.
Yeah.
And in typical ADHD fashion, which is a phrase that I keep saying because, you know, it's like we're talking about it, but we're living it as well. I completely forgot about it, and, you know, didn't even think about it then after it left my mind, until somebody in work came out and was diagnosed late in life, not just with ADHD but also with autism, which I don't know a whole lot about. But the way she came out in work, you know, which is very, very frightening.
Yeah.
And was so open about it. You know, she didn't hold anything back. She was very kind of trailblazery. And it kind of spurred me on, you know, to step outside my comfort zone. She didn't come in saying anything like, you know, oh, this has changed my life, or, you know, if you do this and it kind of gives you more information, it's going to make such a difference, or anything like this. It was just literally the bravery and the openness that spurred me on.
Yeah.
I was like, she's gone and done that. She's come and told people about it. She's been so open. I'm just going to do it. I feel like the things that she's saying are so me, like other people who I've, you know, talked to or talked about it to. And that spurred me on. So I spoke to my wife about it, and she was like, well, where is this coming from? You know, this is just completely out of the blue. Why do you feel like you need to get this assessment? And I kind of tried to explain to her how it popped up, and it'd been on my mind for a while. And eventually I went to talk to my GP, said, look, I think this might be a thing with me. What do you suggest we do? So went through a very kind of brief survey, and she referred me then to a psychiatrist to get properly assessed. And my catchphrase, in typical ADHD fashion, I couldn't wait for that guy to get back to me. So I went Googling and eventually found somewhere where I thought this guy worked, and emailed them. They called me back and said, hey, look, you know, we can do an assessment, but we don't do psychiatric assessments. So it would be just a psychological assessment. We would be able to tell you if you do have ADHD, and if you do, we can give you some tools and stuff like that to help you. And I was like, at this stage, I need to know. I can't wait. I need to know. So it turned out this place was completely separate, and went for the 3-hour assessment. You know, had my wife in to answer questions about childhood and stuff like that. And eventually, a few weeks later or whatever it was, got the report that said, yeah, you've severe ADHD combined type, and had a load of, you know, tools and resources and areas that I could look to kind of help improve the challenges that I was going through. And that didn't really help, you know, because realistically, you know, the tools and resources are great if you can use them, like great for people who can do things. But for people like us with our executive dysfunction, you know, you can have all the great intentions in the world to use these things, but actually getting around to using them is a different story. So I think it was maybe about a month or two over the Christmas, I realized that, you know, this isn't going to work for me, and I need to dig into medication, see if that's going to actually have a difference. And I met with a guy who was actually, so the girl from work, she was what was she? She was like a neurodiversity champion for EMEA in work. And she had a co-champion, a guy from the UK. So I reached out to him, and, you know, he had recently been diagnosed as well with ADHD. reached out to him and just to have a conversation. Never met the guy before. He was really, really kind to give me the time. We had a great chat, and he kind of, went down the conversation route of medication and how much it helped him and changed things for him. And I was like, okay, after this, I really need to kind of go that route. So made an appointment with a psychiatrist that I found. Luckily, it was quite short notice. Couple of weeks. I only had to wait. I know waiting lists are huge at the moment, so you can be waiting years, especially on the public side. But privately, even the waiting lists are huge. But eventually, met up with this psychiatrist. Her name is Lena Norton. She's lovely, quite local here to me, and went through a shorter diagnosis process or assessment process, because I'd taken the report from the psychologist with me, so that had a lot of the information that she didn't need to go through, but it was still like a 2-hour process or whatever. And we talked about it. She said severe ADHD combined type, and we talked about other things in life. We've had a very strange kind of few years in
Fair to say.
in my family, and it kind of she broached the question about depression, and I was like, I feel like potentially my whole life, there's been an air of that. It's never gotten so serious that I needed to do anything about it. Well, that's not true actually. Once when I was a teenager, I was going to the doctor to kind of talk about it, and my mom was bringing me up actually, and when we were outside the doctor's office in the car, I just decided to myself that no, I'm not going in. I'm not going to have this conversation. I just, whatever I need to do, well, I'll do it like in my own brain space. I can figure it out. I don't want to go in and say, I'm depressed, I need medication or anything like that. I was afraid of what like depression medication could do.
Of that,
Not even connotations, but just like what it would do to me. In terms of personality, would it change me? Would it affect how I live my life or whatever it was? So that was the only real time I had kind of come up against a real conversation or a real situation with depression. But she brought it up, and we talked about life and how things had been going, and she essentially said, look, you're depressed. You do have ADHD. You are depressed. And what do you think about that? How do you feel about that? And I was like, it's not a surprise really, like based on everything that's gone on over the last few years. And she broached the question of do you want to look at treating the ADHD first or the depression first? And I won't go into that because we've already posted a little snippet from a previous episode. But we went down the route of treating the ADHD first, and we experimented with medication. I think you like to call it titration. I call it experimentation. And you can keep your pharmacology language to yourself. But it was an interesting process, and I'm sure we'll talk about medication and its effects and how the process goes later on. But I've been on a few different medications. Some worked, some didn't work as well as others. Some had pretty severe negative side effects while also being quite positive. But what I'm doing now at the moment seems to have a really good effect, really positive, and I've been doing that now for a good 6 or 7 months, and I'm really happy with the situation as it is now. And that's a wrap on episode 2. We hope you enjoyed listening to Harv's chaotic experience with the ADHD assessment and diagnosis process. Remember, whether you're navigating the daily challenges or celebrating those ADHD wins, whatever the situation, we're here to share the ride with you. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share your feedback with us. Let's keep the conversation going until next time. Until then, stay quirky, stay awesome, and keep embracing your unique ADHD journey. Take care, and we'll catch you on the next episode of ADHDerpCast, where Stephen shares his own journey on the bumpy road to diagnosis.